England's Advance to World Power. Chapter 1. William of Orange. From his earliest years, the extraordinary prince, who in the general interest robbed his father-in-law of the British throne, had dwelt under harsh and stern conditions. William of Orange was fatherless and childless. His life was loveless. His marriage was dictated by reasons of state. He was brought up by a termagant grandmother, and in his youth was regulated by one Dutch committee after another. His childhood was unhappy and his health bad. He had a tubercular lung. He was asthmatic and partly crippled. But within this emaciated and defective frame there burned a remorseless fire, fanned by the storms of Europe and intensified by the grim compression of his surroundings. His greatest actions began before he was 21. From that age, he'd fought constantly in the field and toiled through every intrigue of Dutch domestic politics and of the European scene. For 4 years, he'd been head of the English conspiracy against the Catholic King James II. Women meant little to him. For a long time, he treated his loving, faithful wife with indifference. Later on, towards the end of his reign, when he saw how much Queen Mary had helped him in the English sphere of his policy, he was sincerely grateful to her, as to a faithful friend or cabinet officer who'd maintained the government. His grief at her death was unaffected. In religion, he was of course a Calvinist, but he does not seem to have derived much spiritual solace from the forbidding doctrines of the sect. As a sovereign and commander, he was entirely without religious prejudices. No agnostic could have displayed more philosophic impartiality. Protestant, Catholic, Jew, or infidel were all the same to him. He dreaded and hated Gallican Catholicism, less because it was to him idolatrous than because it was French. He employed Catholic officers without hesitation when they would serve his purpose. He used religious questions as counters in his political combinations. While he beat the Protestant drum in England and Ireland, he had potent influence with the Pope, with whom his relations were at all times a model of comprehending statesmanship. It almost seemed that a being had been created for the sole purpose of resisting the domination of France and her great king. It was the natural consequence of such an upbringing and of such a mission that William should be ruthless. Although he'd not taken part in the conspiracy to murder the Dutch statesman, the De Witts, in 1672, he had rejoiced at it, profited by it, and projected and pensioned the murderers. He had offered to help James II against the Protestant Duke of Monmouth, but took no trouble to hamper Monmouth's sailing from his refuge in Holland.